In August 1944, a great tank battle was fought on these fields. One of the men killed in the action was Germany's highest-scoring panzer ace. Michael Wittman was known as the Black Baron. He had killed 138 tanks, and he was a hero of the Third Reich. Like the death of the Red Baron in the First World War, there's been some controversy over who killed Michael Wittman. We have come back to this battlefield in Normandy to re-examine the evidence and determine who killed Michael Wittman. This is where the remains of Michael Wittman were found in 1983. And of course, a lot of groups have claimed that they killed Michael Wittman. The British claim that they have done it.
Quite frankly, I'm quite pleased that I got rid of him.
There's rumors that a Typhoon aircraft came in and killed him.
It was found with the turret blown off. Only a Typhoon could have done that.
And there's some that say the Canadians got him.
I believe the Sherbrooks did knock out Michael Wittman.
To resolve the mystery of who killed Michael Wittman, we're going to have to look at the battlefield and analyze it. We're going to have to look at the armor of both sides, and we're going to look at the men who fought in the battles in Normandy. This is the men of the Sherbrooks, the Northamptonshire Yeomanry, and of course the German Panzer Corps. And the most famous is Michael Wittman, Germany's top panzer ace.
Michael Wittman is born in 1914 and grows up a farm boy with ambition of greater things. At 19, he joins the military and quickly makes his way up through the ranks. By the war's outbreak in 1939, he is serving in the Führer's own elite guard, the Leibstandard Adolf Hitler of the Waffen-SS. Commanding a self-propelled gun, he quickly distinguishes himself on the battlefield, earning a reputation as a fearless leader. But this is only the beginning for Michael Wittman. In the spring of 1943, he is given command of one of Germany's most fearsome weapons, the Tiger tank. Assigned to the Eastern Front, Wittman's bold tactics claim an impressive 56 tanks and artillery pieces in just over 6 months. By the end of January 1944, his overall tally soars to an amazing 100 kills. His exploits become headline news throughout Germany. Dubbed the Black Baron by both friend and foe, in February, Wittman is decorated by Hitler himself. But for all the accolades, his greatest victory still lies ahead, battling the Allied invasion force on the Western Front. June 6, 1944, the Allies launch their invasion of Normandy. The German High Command quickly orders 4 divisions forward to reinforce the Normandy front, including the 2nd Company, the 101st SS Panzer Battalion, now commanded by Michael Wittman. On June 13th, as a column of British armor rolls in to occupy the village of Villers-Bocage, the Black Baron pulls up just outside town.
I'm with Daniel Taylor, who's an expert on the Battle of Villers-Bocage, and he's going to explain what happened on June 13th, 1944. So what was happening here with Wittman's Tigers?
Well, they'd found themselves in this little lane. They'd been advancing from Belgium for about 5 or 6 days. The unit was strung out across hundreds of miles. They'd managed to get here with 5 tanks. The place presents pretty good cover.
So they're encamped along this lane?
Yeah, dispersed along it, yes.
So what happens in the morning?
Well, in the morning, Wittman's roused by the sound of tanks coming along the road.
So they're literally, what, 200 yards away?
About that. He'd have seen as the turrets went along that line.
Right up on top of here?
Up there, yes.
Okay, so now Wittman, what's his reaction to this?
Well, he's got very few options left open to him. There's probably an argument about what he should have done, but what he decided to do was attack.
Ich hatte keine Zeit, meine Kompanie aufzustellen. Ich musste schnell handeln. Ich fuhr los mit nur einem Panzer bis zur Säule und überraschte die Engländer genauso viel, wie sie mich überrascht hatten.
Wittman's come barreling across the field. First shot, takes out a Firefly.
He's hitting them from, what, 50 yards?
If that, yes. Point blank range.
So he's not going to miss.
The rest of his unit is to try to engage A squadron up on the top of the hill you can see there. And he's come across the field and he runs into a column of transport. They all start bursting into flame.
So now he's going to drive into town and he's leaving dead and burnt out vehicles behind him. So the guys in the village, do they know what's going to hit them?
Absolutely not, no. It's going to be a big rude surprise to them any second now. So Wittman's come down, he's run into these 4 Cromwell tanks, which you think might have a bit of a chance against him. He manages to get a couple of shots off at the Tiger before he's taken out. They just bounce off.
So they're bouncing off at, what, 50 yards?
50 yards, no distance at all. The following Cromwell has pulled behind this wall and pulled into the courtyard of that building.
Right.
That's commanded by Captain Dias.
I suddenly saw this Tiger tank shooting down the main street. I got the driver to reverse our tank into a farmyard. And in the next moment, to my astonishment, with no gunner in our gunner seat, the Tiger went right in front of me.
Unfortunately for the Cromwell, the gunners just got out to have a pee. And so there's no way that he can fire. With the
So he's missed a glorious chance.
Glorious chance. The Tiger's passing side on right in front of him. No way of firing. The Tiger then passes on, turns into the high street. Another target-rich environment.
Wittman's rampage claims a total of 12 tanks and 15 other vehicles, all in a little under 10 minutes. Deciding not to push his luck any further, he retreats back through the village.
So how many tanks and soft-skin vehicles did he get credited for this attack?
Well, the Germans credited him with an entire regiment.
In diesem Ort prallten die Panzer zusammen. In den engen Straßen wurde eine stärkere amerikanische Panzereinheit gestellt und zusammengeschossen. Seit dem ersten Tag der Invasion haben die Angloamerikaner rund 1000 schwere und schwerste Panzer verloren.
Wittman's attack on the British is a huge gamble that pays off. With it, he single-handedly breaks the Allies' momentum and stalls their advance out of Normandy. For his actions at Villers-Bocage, the Black Baron is once again decorated by Adolf Hitler. The ambitious farm boy has now become a living legend. But Wittman's luck is running out. In less than 2 months, the Third Reich's mighty Black Baron will be dead, leaving behind an enduring mystery surrounding his death. June 13th, 1944, Panzer Commander Michael Wittman makes military history with a daring solo attack on a British armored column at the Norman village of Villers-Bocage. His actions that day stall the Allied advance on the strategic town of Caen, and it takes nearly 2 more months of bloody combat in the surrounding area to finally drive the Germans out.
We're on the road south of Caen, going to the village of Sintho, the place of Michael Wittman's final battle. Throughout July 1944, the Allies launched a number of offensives at Caen, finally capturing it and pushing into the fields to the south, with some of the most severe fighting of the Normandy campaign. Throughout July, the Allies advanced a very short distance with tremendous casualties. No one suffered worse than the tankers, and in 1 month of battle, more than 400 Allied tanks were destroyed.
One of the first things we saw in Normandy was a knocked-out Sherman tank. And it had gone up in flames, as Shermans were infamous for exploding, going into a sheet of flame 20 or 30 feet high. The tank that we saw still had 2 or 3 of the crew sitting inside, but no longer recognizable as human beings.
The Germans used to call us Tommy cookers because they burnt so easily. I became a fatalist overnight. And I'm glad I did, because I think that's the only way you could survive.
And one, at that point, realized that we were in tremendous danger, because this was something that Germans could obviously do with their great guns.
They'd go in one side, out the other sort of thing of some of our tanks. But the main thing was that they could knock out our tanks at a safe distance.
And we had not been informed in any way that this is the fate that waited us just up the road. In your mind, every German tank was a Tiger, because the Tiger was a terror, and if it was a Tiger, then you had to fight for your life.
Each one of us, you know, you had the jitters every time you saw the buggers because the gun was so much superior.
Technically, the range needed to knock out a Tiger by a 75 was about 2 or 3 inches. The shots from 75 were bouncing off like ping pong balls. One thing we had in advantage was what we called a Firefly. It was still the normal Sherman, but the 75mm gun, which was about 6-pounder, had been replaced by a 17-pounder. For the first time, we realized we now had a tank which was equal to the Tiger, and we were able to believe it.
August 7th, 1944, more than 25,000 British and Canadian troops assemble for Operation Totalize, a major offensive devised to crack the German defensive line south of Caen. Unlike previous operations, Totalize is planned as a night assault to confuse the Germans and limit their response. It begins at midnight, August 8th. The initial attack is a success, and in less than 4 hours, the Allies break through the German lines and begin advancing south. Progress in the dark is slow for some units, while others, like the Northamptonshire Yeomanry and the Sherbrooke Fusiliers, proceed quickly to their objectives. Isolated from the main force, they dig in for the inevitable German counterattack. And so it is, in the early hours of August 8th, the stage is set for the Allies' final confrontation with the Black Baron.
The Northamptonshire Yeomanry were one of 2 units involved in the killing of Michael Wittman. And to recreate what happened to Wittman, we have to find out exactly where they were. Now, we know that in 1944, they hid in the orchard south of St. Agnan. But in 60 years, a lot of things have changed. For example, the orchards aren't there anymore, so we're going to have to try to determine where they were. And this is also true of the Sherbrooke's position, and it's going to be a little challenging to try to find out exactly where everybody was. Country road south of St. Agnan. And by 8 a.m., the yeomanry were on their objective, which was the village. They had discharged their infantry. They moved south into these woods, and they built defensive positions in case there was a German counterattack. Today, there's no orchards and very little woods, but this whole area was wooded in 1944. And from here, they got a commanding view of the area to the south and to the west. You can see the Route Nationale over here, and the Germans were further south. But as the yeomanry were digging in,
the Canadians were also advancing west of the Route Nationale. So what we're going to do is we're going to go by the Canadian cemetery, and just a little bit north of it is Gumisnel, which is a very, very small hamlet. And this is where the Sherbrooke set up. We know it was in a stone wall around an old chateau. Here's, looks like our wall. So this is our first entrance into Gumisnel. So we'll go right into the middle of the hamlet, and we'll ask where this chateau was. So this is the eastern outskirts of the hamlet of Gumisnel, and we're right on the Route Nationale. You can see the cars coming by. They're routing our battlefield. So what I'm looking for is an old wall that belonged to an old chateau. And there's a lot of old stuff around here. Pardonnez-moi, monsieur. Bonjour, monsieur, ça va? Ça va. Et je cherche pour le place pour le vieux château et le vieux mur.
Oui, voilà. Tout de suite, on est ici.
Oui.
Là, la maison. Et le vieux château, ici.
OK.
Et un mur tout autour, comme ça. Le château, il a brûlé avec les Anglais. Mais ce n'était pas l'aviation, ni les chars, ni le... il a brûlé.
C'est un accident.
Accident bête, oui. Accident... beaucoup...
Merci, monsieur.
Voilà.
So what's happened is the old chateau was just north of here, and that the wall came around. It was a huge wall that went up to this area around about 30 meters down that way, then down to the main road. Then at the end of the war, the chateau burnt down, and apparently a bunch of English soldiers got drunk and the thing caught fire. So this is the correct wall. I want to see if I can get inside there to see exactly what the Sherbrooks could see on the day of the battle. When I got through here, so that certainly looks like the wall we're looking for. If you look over here, you can actually see the work of the Sherbrooks. You can see the holes over there. Those are Sherman-size holes. And that's where they would have broken through. You can also see where they knocked down the wall to firing height. And of course, this is where they set up some of their defensive positions. It gave them an incredible field of fire, and if the Germans wanted to attack from Sinto north, the Sherbrooks had them. So, based on the description, the Sherbrooks were hiding behind here. But what's really exceptional about this is that they were so well hidden that no one even knew they were here. And even the histories of the war afterwards don't mention anything about the Sherbrooks being here. Walters had picked such a superb position that no one was ever going to find him. But what he didn't know was that about a mile away to the south at the village of Sintho, the SS are having their little conference, their ops group, and they're planning a counterattack. And one of the men that's going to be in the counterattack is Michael Wittman.
For the Germans, the situation is critical. Operation Total Eyes has broken their defensive line, decimating an entire division in the process. Now it threatens to cut off all remaining German units in Normandy. They have no choice but to strike back without delay to halt the Allied advance. Kurt Meyer, commanding the 12th SS Division, is ordered to launch a counterattack near the Route Nationale. Faced with overwhelming odds, Meyer calls upon the one man capable of turning the tide, the Black Baron.
northern end of the village of Syntho, and on August 8, 1944, it was where the Germans made their plans to do something about the breakthrough of total ice. So right in this area, Kurt Meyer met with Michael Wittman and other officers to discuss what measures were going to be taken for the counterattack. Their main concern was a series of Canadian tanks back over the ridge. He saw them massing. He knew they were going to have a large offensive coming very quickly, so he ordered Wittman to take his Tigers, as well as some other tanks and some SP guns, to come and hit the Canadians. Sort of like what he did at Villers-Bocage. Get out there quick and try to put them in disarray and buy some time for the Germans. So at 11:30, he shook hands with Meyer and he went to his Tigers. At 12:30, they had launched their attack. Called for 5 tanks to come across this field and 2 to go on the other side of the Route Nationale. Their objective was to get over the hill and hit the Canadian tanks that were massing there for the second phase of Operation Total Ice. It takes them about 10 minutes to get into this area, and bang, the first Tiger gets hit. In the meantime, Wittman is over by the Route Nationale. He must have seen this because his radio communication goes,
Achtung! Achtung! Pack von rechts! Pack von rechts!
The second tank goes up. It's brewed completely up in the air. And the third tank is disabled because they've hit the wheels of the track and it's trying to get out and it's retreating. In fact, it goes backwards across this field and bang, it goes up. So in a few minutes, the field is all burning wreckage. The men are climbing out of the turrets. They're bringing their wounded. They're trying to get out of here before they're shot down. And as they go by, they see Tiger number 007, and it's not moving, and its turret is askew to the east.
In the aftermath, no one is sure exactly what has become of the Black Baron. He simply declared missing in action. At the time, the only clues to his fate are a few scattered reports from surviving German tankers.
When I looked out to the left, I saw that Michael's tank wasn't moving. The turret was displaced to the right and tilted down to the front somewhat. When I got to within about 250 to 300 meters, as a flame suddenly shoot from the tank, and the turret fly off and fall to the ground.
These accounts would remain unsubstantiated for decades, until a photo of the battlefield taken by a French farmer in 1945 confirmed at least some of the details surrounding the destruction of Tiger 007. Since then, more and more evidence has been surfacing in the field near Gosmenil.
C'est votre collection?
Voilà, c'est la collection.
Les pièces par le champ de bataille.
Beaucoup de choses ramassées par mon père, oui.
Non, vous trouvez
Oui.
toutes les pièces et votre père
Oui.
trouvé à quelle place? Dans le champ?
Oui.
Ouais.
Là où on a trouvé les corps, oui.
Ouais, et toute la région aussi? C'est
Oh,
pour les autres pièces?
aussi, mais voilà, je peux vous dire, certifié que celui-ci vient de
Sur le champ de bataille.
007, oui, voilà.
Oh, bon.
C'est pas le plus beau, il est abîmé, mais...
So this is remarkable to actually touch the pieces of our investigation. This is the real thing.
La réglophone,
Pour la gauche.
voilà, j'ai plus besoin du micro.
Ah, c'est
Oui.
This
Faut
is
l'essayer.
they would talk through this part. So they talk to their throat and it would go out. It's quite unique to the Germans.
Il est probable qu'ils viennent du type de Wittman.
Oui, je pense.
C'est cette pièce.
Oh, oui, that's
Oui.
from Wittman's Tiger.
Wow.
This is an 88 armored piercing shell. So this is where the charge is, and they load it in the gun. Go
Oui, oui, oui.
avec le feu.
That's why the tiger was deadly.
Cette pièce aussi, c'est une trappe qui était dans le fond de la tourelle.
Oui. C'est le plancher de la tourelle.
C'est le plancher, une partie du plancher de la tourelle, oui.
Oui. Wittman, il a marché là.
Oui.
Bien sûr.
Oui, oui.
Pour la dernière fois aussi.
La dernière fois, oui. Et même
So.
sa femme a pleuré quand elle a vu cette pièce.
Oui, c'est ça. Par la photo, je pense.
Voilà. C'est ce qui comble le vide du cercle là.
Puis la grande explosion fait comme ça.
Oui.
Et les pouces. Et qu'est-ce que c'est ici?
Ceci, oui, c'est une tourelle que j'ai fait le même jour que les deux cercles de la tourelle.
So this is a rocket fired from a Typhoon that was found at a similar time as they dug up these pieces from the Tiger. This gives us another dimension of who could possibly have killed Michael Wittman.
These relics from Tiger 007 provide the first pieces of tangible evidence, linking battlefield accounts with a photo of Wittman's wrecked tank in the field near Gosmania. But they still have yet to reveal what became of the Black Baron himself, and more importantly, who it was that fired the fatal shot. To find answers, Norm Christie must reconstruct the battlefield, first by pinpointing the precise location where Wittman's tank was destroyed.
So we're on the battlefield of August 8, 1944, right beside the route nationale. Michel, qu'est-ce que vous trouvez en 83 ici?
Nous, beaucoup plus, ici 60-70 mètres. Environ 60 mètres peut-être. Nous sommes vraiment certainement sur l'endroit où les 5 hommes étaient.
Avec qu'est-ce que l'insigne de SS ou
Oui, sur le Wittman, oui, il y avait la veste encore, en cuir.
So what Michel has told us is that they found a few remains just below the surface here. First some on top, a few fragments of bones, and then they called the German war graves in and they started to dig, and they dug down and found more remains. They found Panzer tanker uniforms, identity discs, a pistol that belonged to Michael Wittman found here. So they came to the conclusion that the remains found here were the collective remains of Tiger 007, which was Wittman's tank for the attack on August 8th. So now we know, out of the 4 Tigers that were destroyed on this field, that the one here belonged to Michael Wittman.
But the question remains as to who fired the fatal shot. Having established the positions of the Allied units, Norm will attempt to resolve whether it was the Yeomanry or the Sherbrooks that killed the Black Baron.
Here we have the positions of the Sherbrooks. We know that they were located just behind the chateau. And of course, we know what the Yeomanry were over there at St. Etienne. So we have that position and this position, which was the pinchers that caught the Tiger attack. So now, using some aerial photographs taken in 1944, we can actually piece together the history of what happened to Michael Wittman.
On August 8, 1944, Germany's greatest tank commander, Michael Wittman, was killed in this field. So far, Norm Christie has pinpointed the positions of the British and Canadian forces, along with the final location of Wittman's tank. Now, using aerial reconnaissance photos from 1944, he will determine once and for all who killed the Black Baron.
I'm with Jan Juo, and he's an expert on the battlefield here near Sintho, and he's going to help us put together the mystery of Michael Wittman. Let's look at what we got. And this is the original photograph, so this shows how it was before. Now, this area has changed quite a lot, hasn't it?
Yes, in large parts, yeah.
But we do have the fields where the 4 Tigers were.
Yeah.
We're okay there. That's where Wittman's remains were found.
Yeah, closest to the road.
Yeah, and that's where Surge's photograph of 007 was taken.
That's
in
correct.
1945. So the other part is where the Yeomanry were. Now, what's changed in this area?
Particularly the orchards there, to the right of Wittman's group.
Right.
Most of them have gone, disappeared completely.
So
We don't know exactly where they were, but we can do it within 50 yards.
Oh, yes, I should think so.
So the next piece is, of course, the Sherbroughs. Now, that chateau and the wall, a lot of that's all gone now, right? The Sherbroughs are going to be the challenge because we also don't know which Sherbrough took the shots. So let's go set it up and try to recreate this battle that really took place in about, what, 10, 12 minutes?
Oh, yeah, at most.
Let's go get the surveyor and find out what really happened.
Okay.
So this is the position where 007 was knocked out. This was Wittman's tank, and this is where we're going to start our investigation. So we're going to analyze the field from really a line of sight from the various positions to see what they could actually see. And then we're going to use surveying and GPS to do the rest, to get our distances. So we can ask Vincent to set this as our original point 0, and then we'll go out and find the locations of the other tigers over here. So we'll head out and let's do the one that was due east first.
Right.
Using the aerial photographs from 1944, Norm plots the field positions of the 4 wrecked tigers. The yeomanry claims that their gunner, Joe Atkins, took out Wittman along with 2 others. A remarkable feat, to say the least. Norm is returning to the yeomanry's position south of Saint-Agnan to examine the battlefield from there to test the validity of the British claim.
So let's look at it. So we got Syntho over here, Mesnil, okay, and we've got the yeomanry over here all set up, nicely dug in. So now they're ready for any counterattack should there be one. And of course, the Germans usually did very quickly.
We were, by midday, aware that the Germans had got to come. They couldn't leave us there any longer. There were 4, certainly 4 tigers, which came down on what would have been our side of the main road.
I saw these 3 tigers come across in front of us, about 1,200 yards away. Our tank commander told us to wait till they got to about 800 yards. I was now starting to get a bit itchy. The tank commander said, advance driver, and we pull out of cover. As we pull out of cover, he says, target the rear tiger. Can't see very much. You're looking through a periscope that big, at 800 yards, I mean, they're tiny, you know. I fired. As we were reversing back into cover, I'd look round at the second tank, and I was probably more frightened, but I was sort of thinking, get the bastards before they get me. I fired 1 shot at the second tank in line. He immediately blew up. The third one definitely were milling around looking for cover. As soon as I was ready to fire, I fired.
The yeomanry are here. They claim there's 3 tigers coming up, and they hit all 3 of them. So what's the danger area for a Firefly? How far can they shoot effectively?
Effectively, they would shoot at 800 meters, I would say. They could shoot at as far as 1,200 meters. But from here, that would be a very, very lucky shot.
Right.
I think we're looking at Wittman's tiger there.
Right.
Was about 1 kilometer away.
So let's ask Vincent. Can you give me the third one?
767 meters.
And the second one we did?
754 meters.
Okay, 754. So that's this one. That's that one there. 754. How far to tank 1?
775.
775. So that's within 800. That's a good
right,
distance
yes.
for a Firefly. Now, How far is the Wittman one?
967.
967, so it's almost a kilometer, so 1,100 yards, which was at the very top of the range for the gun.
There are several things to consider. These three tigers here in the line are the closest to this place here where Northamptonshire Yeomanry was located. So it would make sense for them to have taken them out first anyway, because they are within 800 meters French.
So from here you would see those three tigers very clearly on the horizon as they came across. But Wittman is over the rise down towards that white building over there, Gomez Nil. You know, maybe a lucky shot would go through, that'd be a very skilled shot, but that would mean they got 4 tigers.
Yeah.
So that doesn't fit with the belief of what the yeomanry got that day. You can see why the 3 tigers would be sitting ducks, but the 4th one would be quite a challenge.
Norm Christie's investigation into who killed the Black Baron has pinpointed the positions of all the Tiger tanks destroyed near Saint-Thau on August 8, 1944. And his analysis of the British yeomanry's position south of Saint-Aignan has brought their claim into question. He's now traveling to Gosminium to locate the position of the Canadian tanks and survey the battlefield from their perspective to determine whether they could have fired the kill shot.
So, these are the grounds of the old chateau, right?
Yes.
Now, the wall that surrounded it, most of the northern part is gone, but the southern part is still there. We found that the other day. So we know that the Sherbrooks came into this area. Now, your aerial photograph shows that they made holes in some of the walls that were on the Route Nationale, which of course is right here.
There's about 2 big holes we can see in this wall. One would be right in front of us, back here, and the other one would be a bit further to the left, on that side.
We came here earlier to try to find out or look for proof that the Sherbrooks were here. And we found small marks, but we didn't realize at the time how much of the wall was missing. And specifically, that there were breaks in the walls facing east towards where the Tigers would have advanced.
There was a couple right on the road, and it was from that general area that the first German tanks came out from Saint-Thau. Right away, I can remember the wireless net becoming active. I can see them, there's some tanks coming. But with my eyes, I could see the tank closest to the road, about 200 yards, I guess. I didn't fire at him. Other people from my squadron were firing at it now. I don't recall the actual tank blowing up by somebody firing at him. I can remember a tremendous explosion and seeing the turret hit the ground.
Are you surprised to see how close we are to Wittman's tank?
Yes, I am indeed, yeah. Because even when you look at the aerial photograph, it doesn't seem so close. And when you're actually standing in the field, looking over from this side to where Wittman's tank was destroyed, certainly looks very close indeed.
So let's ask Vincent exactly how far we are from Wittman's tank. So Vincent, can you give me a distance to Tiger number 1, Wittman's?
143 meters.
143 meters. That's incredibly close. So we have this situation. We know where his tank was, just over here. So we have the Sherbrooks positions here, and they're shooting in that direction towards Wittman's tank. Now you have a schematic of it.
I showed a drawing of a Tiger, and Serge was actually able to draw the precise area where he observed a big impact, which was located on the left forward cooling grid.
So this is left rear of Wittman's tank. So
that's right.
Your trajectory would be very low here?
Yes, it would.
Because you're so close?
Mm-hmm.
So it's most likely then that would come from this position?
Yes.
And then it went in, and gradually it ignited the fuel and the ammunition, and the turret blew off. That's amazing. I'm surprised we're this close. I thought we'd be around 500 meters, and now we're 150. So really, it almost has to be the Canadians. Can you think of any alternative
Well, Monsieur Varin, who took the photograph that we see here, he's actually suggested that it could have been a Typhoon rocket because he photographed a non-exploded Typhoon rocket that was lying nearby the tank. The reason I would doubt it is a Typhoon rocket is that A, they were ripple fire and weren't very accurate. It would be very difficult to hit a tank. The second thing is that the Typhoon rocket has several pounds worth of explosive, and if the rocket hit the Tiger, the rear of the Tiger would be blown apart.
Right.
So you wouldn't be able to see the hull in one piece.
So there's no evidence of really burning in this?
No, no.
There's just no proof that it happened?
It's unlikely.
So we're left with really one thing here.
The Canadian.
Sherbrooke's had to do it.
Yes.
Having examined the battlefield from the German, British, and Canadian positions, it's now possible for the first time to reconstruct the Battle of Saint-Thô and accurately recreate the attack that killed German Panzer ace Michael Wittman. It is now clear that Joe Ekins, from his position near Saint-Aignan, did destroy 3 Tigers. But it's difficult to believe Atkins could have fired the shot that killed Wittman, especially in the face of strong evidence that indicates that the fatal shot came from the direction of the Canadian tanks at Gosmenil. Position only 143 meters from the Black Baron's Tiger. Following the Battle of Saint-Thô, the Allies pushed further south, continuing their advance against the remaining German units defending Normandy. In just 80 days, they completely encircle the retreating German army. The Battle of Normandy is all but over. In all, 100,000 men lose their lives, including 50,000 German soldiers.
This is Acclaimed German Cemetery in Normandy, and it's the largest German cemetery in Normandy, and it contains 21,000 graves, including 2 of the Tiger commanders killed August 8, 1944. This is Willie Irion. He was the commander of one of the Tigers knocked out going across the field, and you can see it's a collective grave with some of his crew members here. These are always just partial remains because of the fire inside the tank, as they say, brewed up, and there'd be very little after the battle to even bury. One tanker told me the story of burying his crew, and they buried them in a mess tin. You can always tell Wittman's grave because it's surrounded by flowers. Since the war, Wittman has become legendary. There are websites dedicated to him. And this is all very nice, but we should not forget what he fought for. Sometimes we have a tendency to romanticize these people when they're really fighting for Adolf Hitler. This is Wittman's collective grave here, and this is where his partial remains were put in 1983. They had a large ceremony, and Wittman's widow came to it, and they honored him, and they continue to honor him. Michael Wittman lived his life on the edge. He became famous because of his willingness to take risks, to take advantage of opportunities. But for him to make that charge towards the Canadians on Hill 112 was suicide.
I have a feeling that Wittman had been in the war so long that when it got to that point, they were realizing that the war was lost. And whether his last thoughts as he went down the road were simply, Valhalla, here I come.
The Sherbrooks did knock out Michael Wittman. And you didn't make very much of it. None of us knew who the hell this guy was.
He accepted the doctrines of Hitler enough to get in his tank and invade other people's countries, left country after country. Anybody who goes into another person's country To kill is a criminal. I'm afraid he might have been a hero to the Germans, but not to me.
This is Grand Harbor, Malta, and today it's a popular tourist resort, but in the Second World War, it was the most important harbor on the Eastern Mediterranean. And it was so important that the Germans had to control it, or they would lose the war in North Africa. And to do that, they employed siege techniques, starve out the population, and to bomb them into submission. Malta became the most bombed place on Earth. We've come back to Malta to tell the story of the Great Siege, one of the most important battles of the Second World War. We want to look into the people who were here, the civilians, the gunners, the Navy and the Merchant Navy, and of course the legendary fighter pilots who won the Siege of Malta. This is Republic Street in Valletta, and it's the most popular tourist destination. The tourists come to Malta for a lot of reasons. One is to buy stuff from the shops, the great tourist trinkets. The other is for the sun and to party. But Malta also has an incredible history that goes back over 6,000 years. In fact, there are ruins from 3600 BC. This is a ruin from a more modern time. This is not a Roman ruin. This is what's left of the Valletta Opera House. It was carpet bombed by the Germans in April 1942, and much of Malta was like this. This was a beautiful building. Here you can see what's left of one of the columns from the Grand Opera House. You can see where the bombs or shrapnel, really fragments from the bomb, would have taken off a piece of it. And this is really a symbol of what happened to Malta during the Second World War. The most severe raids took place in 1942, but the first one came over with the Italians on June 11th, 1940.
In the late spring of 1940, the tiny island of Malta is a quiet British outpost in the middle of the Mediterranean, far from the war raging in Western Europe. But with the entry of Italy and its colonies into the conflict on June 10th, Malta becomes a principal target for the Italian Air Force. The island now lies at the heart of a vast Axis empire. To the south, some 250,000 Italian and colonial troops are within striking distance of the oil fields of the Middle East, oil that could fuel the Axis war machine for years to come. Seeing Malta as a threat against their Mediterranean supply lines, Italy unleashes its formidable air force in a bombing campaign against the island. With only 4,000 troops and no fighter aircraft to speak of, Malta is all but written off by Allied command. Now the island's last remaining hope lies with a small force of anti-aircraft gunners.
I'm with Major Maurice Ejus of the Royal Malta Artillery, and this is one of his gun emplacements during the Great Battle for Malta. So I want you to explain to me how you laid out your battery.
Yes, well, we had a command post over there.
Right.
And 4 guns, starting from number 1 on the left, number 2 gun, number 3 gun, and number 4 gun.
Here, this is where the gun would have been.
That's right, yes. It used to be stuck to the ground by means of nuts and bolts. It was a 3.7-inch heavy attack gun. The shell was 28 pounds, 28.5 pounds. And the cartridge was about that high.
Your objective was to shoot down and harass.
That's right. The Italians, they used to come at 23,000, 25,000 feet and never change direction, never change height, and never change speed. And as soon as you see a sparkle in the sky, and you say, it's plane! Plane! But when they get too close and they start a deeper dive, then you can't fire anymore. And the operations room used to order barrage 6,000 feet. Each gun position is given an area in the sky to shoot at.
This strategy, known as the box barrage, forces attacking bombers to ascend to higher altitudes over the intended target, hindering their ability to bomb accurately. As planes approach, anti-aircraft units unleash sustained barrages at predetermined angles, creating a box of withering fire that will blast any aircraft attempting to fly through from the sky.
And one plane is shot down. Then you get another half a minute or so, and a second plane comes. And occasionally, you know, all 5 were shot down. At the early months, it was the gunners who actually saved Malta.
The defenders managed to hold out through the midsummer of 1940. Hoping to capitalize on their success, the Allies send 24 Hurricane fighters to Malta, along with experienced pilots from all over the Commonwealth, who quickly chase the Italian bombers from the island's skies. It's the first of 2 devastating setbacks for Italy in the latter half of 1940. In December, the Italian 10th Army is defeated in Egypt by a much smaller British force. And by the end of the year, the Axis is in real danger of losing its foothold in Africa. The Allies are on the offensive at last. But for Malta, this new optimism will be short-lived.
After the initial attacks by the Italians in June 1940, things went pretty quiet in Malta. A lot of the people returned to their homes, and war didn't seem to be such a bad thing after all. But in North Africa, things were changing. The Italians were failing miserably against the British, and now the Germans were to step in. So once again, Malta was going to be a target, this time for the German Luftwaffe.
January 1941, a small British-led force on the tiny Mediterranean island of Malta is held out against 6 months of attacks by Italian bombers. With Malta's skies clear, the Allies begin using the island as a base to attack Axis supply shipping bound for North Africa. Fearing a total loss of Axis holdings in North Africa, the Germans dispatched General Erwin Rommel to regain control of the situation. But if Rommel is to defeat the Allies in the desert, Axis supply routes across the Mediterranean must remain open. In January, the Axis resumes its bombing of Malta, this time under German command. Their mission is to bring Malta to its knees. Among the civilians seeking shelter from the bombardment is Joseph Attard.
I'll have to go down slowly.
Yeah, go down slow?
Because I'm not steady on my legs.
So,
yeah.
Tell me how things changed in January 1941.
Well, a good amount of the bombs dropped on this place here. That was blown down to the ground. All this building. We had 40 people blocked down there, trapped, because there is the crypt down there, and it was used as a shelter. I came here, and I went through the church, and from there was the beginning of the rubble. But we couldn't get onto them. For a couple of days, we could hear the moaning. There were some of them who were still alive. And tears come into my eyes. I was so close to them, and yet so far. We found a baby, which was still alive. I pulled it out together with the others, and that was the only person we saved from there. The others were all dead. Those are the names of the people who were trapped and killed here. I can see their names now. But most of them I know personally, those people. Now, one I know, for example, let me see her name. Got Chettina. Now, Chettina was a young girl of my own age. She had very good looks. Who was carrying the baby I saved. It was not my baby. Yes. Chetta. Well, I remember Chetta.
Through early 1941, the bombing campaign intensifies. But in May, Malta is granted a reprieve when the Luftwaffe force attacking the island is reassigned to the eastern front. The Allies take full advantage, resuming their raids and access supply lines to North Africa. By the end of 1941, they are inflicting 80% losses on Axis shipping. But in December, with Rommel in full retreat, the Luftwaffe is ordered back to the Mediterranean with orders to destroy Malta's defense force in advance of a planned invasion. And this time, the Germans have a new weapon, the high-speed Me-109F. These new fighters easily outmatch the Allies' Hurricanes, which are shot out of the sky in alarming numbers.
This is the city of Rabat, and a lot of the RAF pilots were billeted here, and this is where they found their entertainments. February and March 1942 were terrible months for the fighter pilots. Their Hurricanes were grossly outnumbered by the Luftwaffe, and the Me-109F, the modified fighter, was just too much for the Hurricanes. So Buck McNair, the Canadian ace, decided to take some of the pilots of 249 Squadron out for relaxation. So on the night of March 21st, 1942, they went down to the theater to watch a film. In the middle of the film, the air raid siren went off, they decided to leave, and they had to come along this street, hiding in each doorway just to be safe from the bombing. When they finally got to this point, they're going to go over to the Point de Vue, which was the officers' mess, for a stiff drink. And as they went through this door, they started to approach it, and all of a sudden, bang! A bomb went off. When McNair awoke, he was on the second floor and didn't know what happened. And when he made his way down, he found the bodies of his friends. The building still shows a lot of damage from the one bomb. You can see holes here, all along the wall, even on the ceiling. In March and April 1942, no place was safe in Malta. The Germans were literally neutralizing it. They're bombing everywhere and everything in their preparations for the invasion.
The Germans attack the island day and night, bombing harbors, airfields, and civilian targets. Malta's cities and towns are reduced to rubble, forcing virtually the entire population to seek refuge underground.
This is one of the communal bomb shelters in Vittorioso in Malta. And this is where the whole population of Malta would live, or at least they'd live underground. You can see that this is all limestone and it's all hand chiseled. Here are the pick marks up here. And the advantage to the Maltese is that their whole island is a limestone rock, which is quite soft. That meant they could dig in. So when the Germans bombed, the whole population went underground. This shelter is about 150 feet underground because it's built into the ramparts of an old fort. And you can see here, this is the sleeping quarters, and you can imagine how cramped the conditions would be and how stale the air. Personally, I don't like small places. I don't know how long I'd last, but I'd much rather be under here than having to face the bombs. These little holes are very well-planned ventilation shafts. And of course, they'd have to drill them all the way through to the top to get some fresh air because the air down here would be totally stale. Even now, with just a couple people around, you can tell it wouldn't be very comfortable. And if you had a whole bunch of people, families, hundreds of people here, they probably couldn't wait to go upstairs. But during April 1942, the Germans were bombing so often, every few hours, that they had to stay down here almost 24 hours a day. They didn't realize it, but the Germans had dubbed Malta the Hornet's Nest, and now they were going to smoke it out. To do this, they brought 600 aircraft, including 300 fighters. Now, the people could stay underground and they'd be protected from the bombs, but that wouldn't save Malta. Malta needed a new fighter. They needed Spitfires.
April 1942. The Mediterranean island of Malta is under constant attack by the Luftwaffe. Speedy Me-109F fighters have overwhelmed the island's force of Hurricanes, opening shipping lanes to resupply Rommel's Africa Corps and allowing bombers to release their payloads on the island with little or no opposition. For the few pilots still flying in Malta's defense, death seems only a matter of time as the Luftwaffe hounds them relentlessly.
This is the Cali airfield, and during the Second World War, this was one of the most important fighter bases for the defense of Malta. And now, the only airport that this serves is for the model airplane guys, and you can hear their engines going and flying around here. This was the original base of the Hurricanes 249 Squadron in May 1941, and this was the centerpiece for the defense of Malta. And of course, the Germans knew this, and it was constantly strafed and bombed. They come over 6, 7, 8 times a day with 100 bombers, and they just pound the hell out of this place. And by the spring of '42, there's only half a dozen serviceable Hurricanes in operation, and they were no match for the Messerschmitts. They had been upgraded. So the only way Malta was going to survive was to bring in Spitfires, and a lot of them.
But delivering the fighters to Malta poses a significant problem. Gibraltar, the nearest British airbase, is 1,200 miles to the west, well beyond the Spitfire's range. The solution is simple but risky. The Allies load the fighters onto aircraft carriers and sail them to within 700 miles of Malta. From there, pilots take off and run a terrifying gauntlet of prowling Me-109s, hoping to reach Malta before running out of fuel.
I'm here with Ian McLennan, who flew Spitfires in the defense of Malta. He arrived in July 1942, and he shot down 7 aircraft and was a Malta ace. So within landing, even 24 hours, you saw your first German airplanes?
Oh, well, when we were landing, there were Germans all over the place. Of course, it was being strafed and bombed. And you could just see, I'd never seen it in my life before. 109's coming right at you, with the guns flaring. 88s are dropping bombs around. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. It was a hectic time, you know what I mean? There was no time to be scared. You just, what you were doing, get your Spitfire down. And then running, someone would wave at you and you'd run and get down into cover.
So this was the old Tocali runway.
Right.
And of course it would have been grassed?
No, there was nothing like this. It was just a grass drone. And they kept it. Now, it was always being mended because they were trying always to kill the airfields. The trick was to stay alive.
So once the Spitfires came in down here, they'd be pulled off into a splinter pen. They'd be refueled, rearmed. The pilot would get out, a fresh pilot would get in and go up and join the melee.
Yeah, sure. But the ideal thing was to get up to around 30,000 feet, hanging on your props, waiting for the bounce. So they're coming at you from Sicily, and you're sitting in the sun, and they can't see you. You see these tiny little specks. And maybe there'd be 40 Junkers 88s, and maybe 30, 40, 50 109s. You made sure you gave your guys the best chance for the first bounce, and down we go at them. Saw somebody in trouble, somebody coming up the ass, you would say, break. And if you didn't know who it was, you'd say, break, and everybody broke. I remember once getting bounced, so I just went into a spin and let my aircraft spin all the way down. Obviously, I was shot down. And then when I got right down the water, and the battle's up there, then I pulled it out.
So you played dead?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can remember. I remember the first time I did that, thinking this is very bright because I got away with it. I think the guy. I'm sure he went back and said, "I got this guy." He went into the sea. He's dead. The trick was to get up close, give him a bit of a lead, and if you were flying right behind him, slightly above, coming down.
126 Spitfires that reach Malta have an immediate impact on the island's dire situation. Daylight bombing raids on the island are drastically reduced. And despite being outnumbered nearly 2 to 1, the Spitfires downed 207 enemy aircraft in their first 2 months of action alone.
The aircraft that made the difference in the battle for Malta was the Spitfire. And this is an example here.
A most graceful, it's one of the most beautiful aircraft, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's a wonderful design.
Well, these are the things that did the greatest damage. This is a 20 millimeter and a SAPI ammunition, semi-armor piercing incendiary explosive. So it would go through steel, burst everything. These are the things that blew things apart. The machine guns didn't do as much damage, but mind you, they could kill. You had 20 seconds, 30 seconds firing. So that means you learn to nurse it. Because once you're out of ammunition, you're very vulnerable. Nothing, obviously, but still, you then have to get out of the fight. These are 20 millimeter shells, and it is armor piercing, and it's explosive. So it's a very deadly weapon going into another aircraft. Whereas machine guns just go through, and if it hits you, you're dead, or if it hits something vital, it's dead. But these things do a lot of damage. Blow controls away and all that sort of thing. The wing will come off, a tail will come off. It's just devastating. Whoop. Thanks. Okay, you guys, chalks away.
looks familiar, really familiar. Well, this is the joystick. This is the firing machine. This is, you push that, you get machine guns. Press that, you get everything. Cannons and machine guns. There's one thing here which is for emergency. If you're facing death and you can't get away from some guy and you need power, you take this thing and you push it forward. And it adds water to the gas and gives this engine tremendous power and boost. You have to look over this boost thing. There it is. And you couldn't leave it on for more than a few seconds or the engine would burst, would disintegrate. I remember several times looking at it, flirting with the idea I'm going to use this bloody boost if I don't get out of this fairly quickly. And I think I did it once, but you really didn't want to do it. And I think if I did it, I probably did that. And then did that. And I got away.
But are you proud to have served on Malta, to have fought on Malta?
Well, I guess so, yes. I'm not ashamed of it. You know, yeah, I'm... Yeah, well, there were a lot of guys like me, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Despite the best efforts of the newly arrived pilots, Malta's fate still hangs in the balance. In June, 2 supply convoys set out for the island, but Axis forces still control the surrounding sea and skies. Even with heavy escort, only 2 Allied ships managed to arrive safely. By midsummer, with no further relief on the horizon, the island is on the brink of capitulation. The population is down to its last rations and will not be able to hold out through fall. The pilots, too, are feeling the strain, plagued by poor food and extreme lack of sleep.
They were stressful, tiring times. You get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and you're on service till dark. And that might go on for 3 or 4 days, but exhausting. I think everybody was hungry all the time, somehow. And the Maltese people were practically starving. And every now and then you'd get ill, you'd have Malta dog, or they call it dysentery and that kind of stuff. Everything seemed to be bombed, you know what I mean? Rubble was everywhere. You're cleaning up the rubble and people are walking through, and it stays that way perhaps for months. So it was walking through a beleaguered city full of ruin. And there were air raid shelters down underneath all this limestone, stairs and everything going down. And I remember on one occasion, I started for it, and then I saw a woman sort of running towards it. And I didn't like the feeling of it. I think she was terrified, and I thought she's going to hurt herself. So I started to try to cut her off to reassure her and slow her down. But I missed her, and down she went. And when I went down, she was dead. So, you know, distressing. Very distressing.
This was happening all over Malta.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every day. It was a bad time.
August 1942. The war for North Africa enters its climactic phase. The Allies have stopped the advance of Rommel's Afrika Korps at the First Battle of El Alamein, a victory due in great part to Malta-based attacks on Axis supply ships. For the Germans, the situation is now clear. If they hope for a victory in North Africa, it is imperative they eliminate the threat from Malta, once and for all. In the late summer of 1942, dogfights between Spitfires and Me-109s rage over the island, as the Luftwaffe attempts to wear down the outnumbered Allied defenders.
This is the Chara Palace in Medina, and now it's a 5-star hotel, but in 1942, it was an officer's mess for 249 Squadron, as well as 1 or 2 other fighter squadrons that served at Takali Airfield. And of course, from this position, you can see Takali Airfield just over here. and the pilots who weren't flying could get an excellent view of the dogfights that would go on. So you'd watch the dogfights, so on your day off?
From time to time, yes. You know, you can imagine they're way up there, they're high, and it's fascinating. It's like a small opera, but you can't tell who's who, really. But it can change suddenly. Dogfights varied. There could be 6 Spitfires going after 3 109s strafing right in front of you, under 2,000 feet. Almost you could touch it, you're scared. Guns are blazing or are about to blaze. So it's quite dangerous, and you can hear the bangs and the crashes.
Malta had a lot of great fighter aces, and of course, George Burling was at the top of the list. What made him different?
Well, that he was a phenomenal fighter pilot. Oh, yeah. You didn't argue about it. The guy was coming down with kills all the time. Nobody else could match it. Nobody. And there were some great fighter pilots in Malta. Burling had great eyesight, you know, the little specks. My whole life at that time was little specks. Every time you went up and you were called, you looked towards Sicily for the little specks.
I scrambled to take on 2 Junker 88s, escorted by about 20 ME-109s. 2 MEs got the drop on me. I did a quick wing over and got onto one's tail. He saw me coming and tried to climb away. I figured he must have been about 800 yards away from me when I got him into my sights.
At this distance, Burling is engaged in a war of invisible numbers. His Spitfire is traveling at 250 miles per hour, while the ME-109 is climbing at a rate of over 50 feet per second. The equation grows even more complicated when he factors in the velocity of his weapons. In essence, Burling must not shoot directly at his enemy, rather at a point in space where his enemy and his fire will precisely meet.
I gave him a 3-second burst, smack onto his starboard flank, and got him in the tank. It was a full deflection shot.
He was a pilot who was better than anybody else. He would have been difficult to handle in the squadron because he's so bloody bright and knows what he's got to be doing. And he's better at it than anybody else on the squadron. And he knows it, and they know it, which is not an endearing trait. You know, to be better than everybody else. He didn't have the freedom he needed. He was frustrated. That's the problem. And that made him a troubled guy and a trouble to anybody who had to handle him, I'm sure. But he could have been handled if somebody took the mind to say, look, we've got ourselves an ace here.
By August, Burling was already a legend in Malta. He had 15 kills. He had at least half a dozen probables and damaged. He was the #1 fighter pilot on Malta. But every pilot knew at some point his number could come up. And on August 8th, 1942, Burling's number came up.
A bunch of yellow-nosed ME-109s were waiting for us, and every mother's son of them stayed to fight. I quickly turned to get under one of them and gave him a 2.5-second burst. I hadn't any more than begun to dive when I got mine.
We're trying to find Buzz Burling's crash site of August 8th, 1942. The passage of time makes examining any battlefield difficult. Of course, specifically, exactly where it took place in the field, well, that's another story. Then you need an eyewitness. This is the village of Guja, and it's near Lucca Airport, and we think we found somebody who witnessed the Burling crash. This is quite amazing, considering how few people would have seen it in the first place. So I'm going to talk to him. Hello, Joseph. Hi.
How are you? What you got for it?
I came to find out about the Buzz Burling crash site. You're the eyewitness we're looking for. So, Giuseppe, What did you see when the Spitfire came down?
Kom, man kan niet weten zo.
So he's maneuverable, and he's coming into the ground,
Ja.
close to the ground.
Maar als je een beetje zou nak saja so lalat. Dai paiwa au dai por au halu au.
So
Oh, maar je weet, we proeven dat het. En dat is ook discussieer. We proeven al wat wij er ook laten hebben nou.
Where did the plane crash?
Ja, between more als de heer goed ja.
Ja.
Bidet. En daar is heen.
We're just on the outskirts of Guja, and we're going to try to find out where Burling came down in his famous and very lucky crash on August 8, 1942. They were chasing after a gaggle of Germans over in this area. They were going after Grand Harbor. And just somewhere to the east over there in the sky, a dogfight developed. Now, Burling had already had 15 kills. He went in, and with some very fine deflection shooting, he had his 16th. The Me-109 went down. The problem was somebody got him, and he got hit in the engine, and his engine cut out and died, and he's stuck in the middle of a dogfight with no engine.
The old Merlin wouldn't give me any more than 160 miles an hour and was heating up fast. The Spit was sinking slowly. It begun to look like a bailing job.
By the time he gets his harness all set, he's down to 200 feet. He's got to be going about 100 miles an hour. He came down gradually by that church over there.
Right ahead, I could see a nice plowed field, about an acre in size, surrounded by low stone walls.
Now, the danger here is all these stone walls. If a Spitfire hits one at 100 miles an hour, you're a dead man.
I slithered along, cutting the glide fine, but not too fine. It's damned easy to flip these spits and spit in. Gotta try to keep that nose high.
Burling's Spitfire came across this field, makes a belly landing, and just as it's about to hit the wall, he tips the wing down, and it stops cold. Climbs out of the cockpit, inspects the plane. He had nothing but a cut. He'd escaped his first dangerous clash with death. He'd lived to fight another day.
But struggle as they may, fighters alone cannot save Malta. The island is nearly out of food, fuel, and ammunition. In August, the Allies launch one last effort at resupply. This convoy must reach Malta, or all efforts to defend the tiny island will have been in vain.
By the end of July 1942, Malta was in dire straits. The Spitfires had alleviated the attacks on the island, but it was simply rubble. They had bombed everything into oblivion, and now the people were starving. They had no ammunition, and their fuel was low. They knew that the only way to survive was a do-or-die convoy, and it was codenamed Operation Pedestal, and it left England in early August 1942.
Tensions run high on both sides as the convoy enters the Mediterranean. The Germans know that if they are to conquer North Africa, they must force Malta to surrender. The intercept force lies in wait until the Allied convoy enters the strait between Tunisia and Sicily. There they attack. One by one, the ships of Operation Pedestal are sent to the bottom. But the ultimate prize for Axis gunners is the tanker Ohio, bearing precious fuel for Malta's aircraft. The lightly armed ship struggles forward under murderous fire.
within a week, we would have surrendered, definitely. We were in our last days before extinction. Everybody knew. We had no rations, no ammunition. Petrol had almost finished. No fighters could go up without petrol. If there is no tanker, we shall be lost. The important one was the tanker.
So really, this is the end.
Yes, it was the end. That was definitely the end. There was a week, just a week supplies. We were just hoping that something comes down from heaven. That's why we call the arrival of the convoy, of the Santa Maria convoy, as a miracle. They were praying in churches to Santa Maria to do something, to let something to save Malta. We heard gunfire when it was attacked near Sicily. There was a warning sounded, a red warning, and the people, some of them, found a shelter. But there were those who remained still here. It appeared between the two lighthouses there, being cradled on two cables held by two destroyers. And of course there was the superstructure, all mangled with the bombs and the torpedo. Then everybody followed the Ohio until it went there. And they started immediately piping the oils out. There was joy all around, clapping. It was moving. I think it was the most moving sight in the whole war for us.
After the Ohio, things quietened down in Malta. In fact, the Germans didn't come back until October 10th. That's when they brought all their bombers back and they were going to punish Malta once again. But this time, the Spits were waiting for them, and they shot them down by the dozen. In 5 days, Berling added 8 to his total. But of course, that was his last battle of the war. He was shot down and injured and never flew again over Malta. Ian McLennan added 5 to his tally, including 2 junkers in 1 day. But the real changes were taking place in North Africa. On October 23rd, the 8th Army attacked Rommel's Africa Corps and started driving them back towards Tunisia. In November, the Americans landed in North Africa and they started a pincher movement. And basically, the war in North Africa was over. It was just a matter of time. After 2.5 years of aerial bombardments, the Siege of Malta was over. This is Cappuccini Naval Cemetery, south of Grand Harbor. And it was used by the British for more than 100 years. And there are 700 Second World War burials here. You can see how they're laid out, that the men are buried in crypts, in really a collective grave in a crypt. Then a large slab is put over top, and the details of the burials on top, with the cap badge of the associated unit. It also is, in many ways, the history of the Malta campaign. Buried in this crypt, there are 4 of the men killed at the bombing at Pont de Vue. And you can see here Baker, Guerin, the Australian, Hollis Hallett, and Waterfield were all killed in the doorway of the hotel.
This one here, Pilot Officer Doug Lago, was shot down on the 20th of March, 1942, and his situation is quite infamous. He actually parachuted out of his plane. The German went over and machine gunned his canopy. So the parachute collapsed and Lago fell to his death. "7,000 people died in the defense of Malta, and by Second World War standards, that's a small number for such a decisive victory. All great campaigns are made up of a few mistakes, a few myths, and a few miracles, and Malta was no different. But really, it was the courage and tenacity of all the people who were here that saved the day, whether they be civilians, dock workers, gunners, merchant navy, Royal Navy, or Air Force. And it's really to these people that we should remember that they changed the course of the Second World War. Airfield in northern France. During the Second World War, this airfield was used by the German Luftwaffe. You can actually see the old tarmac. In hundreds of aerodromes like this one, the German Luftwaffe would take off to attack the Allied bomber formations. And for the first years of the war, they had a field day. In 1941, the Allies developed a versatile plywood aircraft known as the Mosquito. And this Mosquito could fly undetected into German-occupied Europe and attack these fighter bases.
From 1941 to 1945, the Mosquito would serve as the Allies' most successful fighter bomber, carrying out some of the riskiest missions of the Second World War.
We've come back to tell the story of the Mosquito and the men who flew them. Those men the Germans called the bandits of the air.
September 1939, the Nazi war machine invades Poland, igniting the Second World War. The following May sees its attention turn west with the invasion of Belgium and France. The German blitzkrieg quickly overwhelms the Allied forces, and by the beginning of June, the survivors are forced to retreat to England. Hitler's domination of Europe is complete. For the Allies, the situation is desperate. With no continental foothold for staging a counterattack and no foreseeable hope of invasion, their only means of striking back is from the air. But the RAF of 1940 is no match for the mighty Luftwaffe. And through the remainder of the year, the Germans exact a terrible toll on Allied bombers and crewmen.
Although the Blenheim, when it was first introduced, was considered to be an advanced aeroplane, which it probably was in about 1936. But by the time the war came, it was getting a bit too slow and a bit too heavy and less maneuverable than it should have been. They got shot down rather easily. I mean, the low-level operations in Blenheims were dangerous. There's no doubt about that. So losses were quite high.
It is clear to the RAF that the Allies need a new kind of aircraft, one capable of penetrating deep into enemy territory. with the speed and maneuverability to avoid German fighters, but with the capacity to deliver the destructive payload of a conventional bomber. And in 1941, they find their savior in the form of an unorthodox wooden aircraft, the de Havilland Mosquito. Based on the design of de Havilland's civilian aircraft, the Mozzie, as she becomes known, is a radically stripped-down version of a conventional RAF bomber. Made almost entirely of wood and manned by only 2 crewmen, the Mosquito sacrifices defensive capability in exchange for increased speed and maneuverability. Constructed of a modest 40-foot wooden frame and with a wingspan of only 54 feet, the Mozzie is remarkably light at just over 14,000 pounds. Powered by 2 1,400 horsepower Merlin engines, the streamlined aircraft can fly at speeds in excess of 400 miles per hour to a range of 1,700 miles. Armed with 4 303 machine guns and 4 20mm cannons, the Mosquito packs a powerful punch. Add in a potential payload of 4 500-pound bombs, and the aircraft becomes the Allies' ultimate fighter bomber. The Mosquito greatly impresses the RAF and is immediately put into service. In September 1941, the aircraft flies the first of many dangerous intruder missions, striking deep inside Nazi-occupied Europe, taking the war back to the Germans at last.
So we're just crossing the English Channel right now. We're at about 1,000 feet and about 150 miles an hour. So we're actually 950 feet at least higher than what the Mosquitoes would cross at. We'd be in a little cockpit that's like this, which is very much like a Mosquito's. It really gives you a very cool feeling. You can just imagine what this would have been like for these guys, and the precision of the flying. And to be able to go at about 200, 250 miles an hour, 30 feet over the channel, and then you got to find out where you're going. I remember one pilot describing hitting the French coast as going over the top. Now you're in enemy territory. And that's where the real routing would take place, because the navigator had to determine where the anti-aircraft guns were. But ultimately, the Germans in '43 weren't ready to deal with low-level intruder operations.
We crossed the narrow lake until we hit a railway line. We turned north, and in less than a minute we were at the airfield. The first thing I saw was a church parade. After all, it was Sunday morning. At least 100 guys were drawn up in perfect lines in the middle of the field. The moment they heard our cannon, they broke and ran, stumbling and falling over each other. There were about a dozen ME-109s parked at the far side of the field. We closed to 50 yards with a 2-second burst. One ME-109 exploded immediately. We hit 2 others. I can see the shells hitting home and yellow flames coming out of the wing grooves, followed by a huge puff of black smoke.
Although the pilots were obviously very good at the Mosquito, the navigator had to be just as good, and they had to work together as a team. And to me, one of the hardest things to understand about these operations is how the hell they found their targets. You're not using radar, you have to pick up these landmarks, whether during the day or at night. And to be able to follow these canals, look for a hill, look for a tower, I honestly don't know how you could do that, especially when you're going 200 plus miles an hour at 50 feet. But the Mosquitoes used their versatility and their speed to get through the German defenses, which made every pilot love them.
It was a different airplane altogether. Although it was made of good Canadian wood, it was a very durable aircraft.
There was nothing like it, even at low level. At full power, it could do almost 400 miles an hour, which was faster than anything else.
Well, it was very exciting, because here we had this, for those days, very high-speed airplane, very maneuverable.
It's a mighty firepower. When you let go, the aircraft almost went backwards.
If you hit an aircraft with that kind of firepower, you could literally blow it apart.
I loved the airplane. I thought it was a beautiful airplane. I felt very safe in it. And it got us out, got us back.
One of the beauties of the Mosquito was its versatility. It was used in photo reconnaissance operations, which are terribly important for intelligence. They were used as pathfinders, flare droppers for the heavy bomber missions. They were used as the fighter bombers. And these aircraft took missions deep into Germany, and they were striking at the heart of the Third Reich.
We were told the evening before there would be an operation in the morning and what time we'd be called and so on. But Reggie said that he'd been briefed already, and I've never forgotten it. This one is different.
The RAF is putting the Mosquito to its greatest test yet. The mission, a long-range bombing raid into the heart of Germany. The target, a radio station in Berlin, where the head of the Luftwaffe, Field Marshal Hermann Göring, is to deliver an address to the German people.
We walked into the ops room and there's this piece of string that starts from Mara and off. It went to Berlin. And everybody asked the same question, do we have enough fuel to do that? We flew in, got up to 25,000 feet, and we were above solid cloud all the way then. We just got to the stage where I was saying, I can't see any breaks in the cloud, we're going to have to bomb on time. When a very small break in the cloud appeared, and I said, hang on, there is a break. And I could see the lakes of Berlin. And of course, we knew where the radio station was, which was the aiming point. And we dropped the bombs. Until the bombs hit the ground, there was no gunfire at all. I don't think they knew we were there. Later, after we bombed, we were able to hear a recording of the radio station.
Unter der mächtigen Stirnwand, in der gewaltige Hoheitsadler herüberschimmert,
Göring was announced by the announcer, but never appeared. And there was a short silence, and then you could hear an explosion.
Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring.
Then you could hear some shouting in the distance. And then they played martial music. We never did that. It was an indication of some of the things that were possible.
Through 1941 and 42, the speedy Mosquito proves itself an exceptionally effective weapon. In just 18 months, the aircraft flies over 1,000 sorties, with remarkably few losses. In 1943, the RAF confirms its confidence in the Mosquito, ordering thousands of more aircraft, with mass production beginning in the UK, Canada, and Australia. But by mid-1943, the air war over Europe is escalating, and Mosquito crews will find themselves in even greater peril as they are assigned the most dangerous missions of the Second World War.
We're on our way to Hunsdon Airfield, just north of London. It's probably the most famous Mosquito airfield. And by 1943, as more Mosquitoes were being produced and more squadrons equipped with the Mosquito, 3 squadrons were operating out of Hunsdon, and they were the most successful intruder operators in the early parts of the war. We're going out to Hunsdon to see what is left of this legendary airfield. I'm with Dennis Sharp, who's an expert on the Hunsdon airfield, and of course this is where the Mosquitoes operated in 1943, 1944. Do people around here know the history of this place?
Not a lot of them do. As you see, it doesn't bear any relation today as what it was then.
this whole place was a sea of buildings. There are 442 buildings on Hunsdon Airfield. Now, today, we're looking at about half a dozen at the most.
This is one of the defense posts.
That's right. This is a Type 21 pillbox. It was one of a ring of many around the actual perimeter of the airfield. You notice that these actual gun ports all point in towards the actual flying field of the airfield. Because with an airfield, the threat of invasion would have been carried out by either glider or paratroops, and they would have landed actually on the airfield to capture key facilities.
We're out on the airfield now. So in 43, what were they using them for?
Well, the airfield, more or less, the whole of its life was dedicated to night fighters and intruders. The original runway ended here. This was the threshold to the main runway.
So this was the nice, smooth concrete?
That's right. This had a dome, high-intensity light in it. These large marker lights in the ground denoted the actual course. If you see, there's like an arrow, which actually is built into the heading of the runway. That is, you took a compass bearing off of there, and that will give you the exact runway heading. When the airfield was originally built, you see those villas, there's also a pub, the Turkey Cock, but it was right in the line of the runway. And apparently, people used to duck their heads while drinking a pint because the mosquitoes was almost hitting the pub on takeoff and landings.
Mosquito was really what made the intruders more successful, right?
That's right.
Aircraft with the Bostons just weren't so good.
No. I mean, the mosquito was born for it, wasn't it? Let's face it. It's, you know, you had reliability, you had the punch, the firepower, and the legs to actually fly from here at low level all the way across the continent to a designated German night fighter base, and then orbit from a few miles out, wait for a German night fighter, and then sneaking up behind him is a mosquito.
So that's why they call them the bandits of the air.
That's right, yeah. It's a way of keeping a German night fighter force on the ground.
In early 1941, Allied Bomber Command begins a campaign of massive night raids on enemy targets. By 1943, RAF bombers have dropped over 20,000 tons of high explosive on Germany's industrial heartland. Fearing the crippling effect of continued raids on their war industry, the Germans strike back. This time with a secret weapon of their own, the radar-equipped night fighter. The results are devastating. In just under 15 months, Bomber Command loses 5,881 bombers. The Allies' best hope of countering these attacks is to penetrate deep into enemy territory and destroy German fighters on their airfields, where they are most vulnerable. And in 1943, there's only one Allied aircraft capable of carrying out such a hazardous mission, the de Havilland Mosquito.
Something completely different for us to go in at night and attack an airfield at Northfleet. And we just didn't know what was going to happen. And I think when it did happen, it was quite frightening. Yeah, it was scary, no doubt about it.
If we were going on an intruder mission as we were taking off, I would often think, well, I hope I'm going to see this airdrome a little later on tonight. I used to duck right down to a couple of 100 feet across the coast, because then you go across their defended area fast, and they wouldn't get around to their anti-aircraft guns fast enough.
We were always low-level intruders, so I mean with a good moonlit night, they could see you from the ground.
And when we got to our target area, the first thing we looked for to see whether the airdrome lights were on. If they were on, we knew that there was operations taking place. They were pretty smart. They knew that there were intruders around, they took off and they stayed right down at 50 feet until they were at least 20 miles out. And then they'd start their climb to get up into the bomber stream. So we seldom had any success except when they were coming into land. You'd head for the downwind side of the aerodrome in the hope that they'd turn some lights on when they're on their approach. And if they did, you'd try to take a crack at shooting them down. The problem was that they knew we were there, and they'd flash this searchlight on the approach once their aircraft got past it.
And so all they did was cover the whole airfield in a blanket of anti-aircraft fire. So you had to fly through it. And that, I tell you straight, was frightening.
The only hope we had then is circling around. You'd whip in and try to get behind them, getting them as they were touching down on the runway.
After that, if you had any ammunition left, you were allowed to go anywhere you like and beat up transport on the ground, trains, canals. And then when you, well, more or less looked at the petrol gauge and said, I gotta go home, you turned around and made back.
This airbase went from night fighters to intruders. Now, at the beginning of '44, they bring a new group here, and that's under Picard.
That's right, 140 wing.
And Picard was sort of a legend already, wasn't he?
Picard was. He made his debut in a film, actually, in 1941 by the Crown Film Unit. They actually made a film called Target for Tonight, and he portrayed the pilot of F for Freddy.
All from F for Freddy here? I'm here anyway. Here, sir. I'm here, Skipper. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Well, that's a change anyway.
He arrived in January of '44, and of course in February of '44, the raid on Amiens, or Operation Jericho, was actually flown from this airfield. And if anyone could do the job, it was him.
In January 1944, Allied intelligence learns that over 100 French resistance members are being held in a jail at Amiens, France, awaiting execution. The French underground requests an urgent airstrike to break open the prison walls and liberate their comrades. The task of planning the mission, codenamed Operation Jericho, is given to the RAF's most experienced mosquito navigator, Ted Sizemore.
Well, we knew we had a problem because we were told that the objective was to break the prison walls to get some of the French prisoners out, who were, I think, key members of the French underground, and they needed them out. The problem was, how do you break down walls, and how do you break down the inner walls without killing everybody inside? Well, first of all, on all targets at low level, you need, if you can find one, a very good lead-in. And of course, that prison, we had a very good lead-in with the road. Perfect. And that meant that we should attack the outside wall parallel to that road. We could then have a choice on how we attack the inside wall, because we knew which parts of the prison were critical. So the outside wall would be attacked with people at low level just dropping bombs straight into it. The inner wall would be attacked by people pulling up and doing shallow dive. The trouble with that sort of operation, you can never do it twice. You get one chance. But it was an urgent operation and it had to go ahead.
At 10 a.m. on February 18th, 1944, a day before the executions are scheduled to begin, 19 Mosquito fighter bombers take off from Huntston Airfield and set out across the English Channel, headed for Amiens. Operation Jericho was a gamble for the Allies, and the stakes could not be higher. At risk are the lives of 38 elite RAF airmen, along with hundreds of French prisoners. February 18th, 1944. 19 RAF Mosquito bombers crossed the French coast and into the hostile skies over Nazi-occupied France. Their mission, codenamed Operation Jericho, is to free over 100 French resistance fighters scheduled for execution. The target? The heavily guarded prison at Amiens.
The mosquitoes came from Doullens to Albert and then turned sharply southwest. And they followed this old Roman road right down here to the prison. Halfway down, the Typhoon split off to engage German fighters, and at 12:01, the first mosquito wave hit the prison.
Whilst the raid was in operation, we could see the fighter defence beginning to operate, which is rather worrying. The fighter airfield at Amiens was very close to the target, so it was almost inevitable that some fighters would get airborne from there and we would have problems.
The first wave were the New Zealanders, and their job was to break the northeastern wall of the prison. And they came in 12:01, 0 feet, dropped their bombs. The bombs skidded on the snow. They had an 11-second fuse for the mosquitoes to get out of there before the bombs went up. The second wave was so tight on coming in behind them, so the first bombs hadn't exploded yet, so they actually had to divert and go around the prison 360 degrees before they came in. And their objective was to hit the buildings themselves.
Once we started getting the actual reports, of course, we were hearing very good news that the walls had been broken and even 1 or 2 reports that they'd seen people running out. And the underground was around the prison waiting for them. We gathered in quite some numbers, so that they were, what shall I say, hustled away quickly before the Germans could organize a recapture. Of course, the loss of Picard was very sad and rather disturbing, really, because he was a character, a rather special character.
After the raid, Picard waited around for a while, and you could see through the smoke that the prisoners were getting out. In fact, more than 250 of them did escape, and the raid was a great success. But that delay allowed the German fighters to close in on him. And he crashed just northeast of Amiens. The French locals took his body out of the wreckage, but before they could bury them, the Germans took them, and they buried them here in the old World War I cemetery at St. Pierre. Charles Picard, DSO in 2 bars, DFC, pilot, Royal Air Force, 18th February 1944, age 28. At the rising and going down of the sun, we will always remember him. Picard was a legend in the RAF, and his action here at Amiens only added to it. Picard lost his life in the most amazing air raid of the entire Second World War.
Following the success of Amiens, Mosquito crews are called upon time and again to perform similar surgical strikes. Late in the war, Denmark's resistance movement sends a telegram pleading for an attack on Shell House, a former Shell oil building now occupied by the Gestapo. The target, a collection of damning evidentiary files on resistance activities. But the Gestapo anticipates an attack and places 26 Danish prisoners as a human shield in the upper floors of the building.
We were called up again to Baker Street and asked if we could attack this one. Well, of course, the first reaction was, how on earth are we going to find a building in the middle of a city? And if we do this job, we're going to kill all those people. And they said, well, you may have to do that. It was difficult, but it was possible, and it was successful, except, of course, that one aircraft hit a pylon on the railway line and crashed into the school just short of the target. This confused the people behind because of the smoke. And some of the later people dropped bombs onto the school, which was sad. But you have to look on both sides. One or two of the people in the attic were killed. One or two were badly injured because they had to jump from about the 4th floor. But some got out alive. Well, if we hadn't had the accident and the disaster of killing some school children, then they wouldn't have had, those Danes probably would never have got out. So it was a very mixed feeling about the raid, really. But it was successful in the sense that it was the documentation that was wanted, and of course it caught fire and the building burnt.
The raids on Amiens and Shell House are just two of hundreds of daring low-level mosquito attacks, which would leave the enemy reeling. The Luftwaffe is simply unable to counter the range, speed, and firepower of what has become the deadliest weapon in the Allied airborne arsenal. But in June 1944, Germany would unleash its own super weapon, the V-1 flying bomb, beginning a new reign of terror over England's civilian population.
We're in a wood outside the village of Moorbeek in French Flanders, and it's approximately 120 miles as the crow flies from here to London. And this is really a great remnant of the Second World War. This is a V-1 launching site. But of course, in 1943, the Allies didn't know that. They got reports from the French resistance about the Germans building bunkers in these odd positions down the Pas-de-Calais and in the Nord region, and you can actually see one of the smaller bunkers over here. But it wasn't the smaller bunkers that concerned them. It's this one right here, this long, skinny one curved at the end, which they dubbed a ski site. They thought that this would be related to the German rocket program in Peenemünde.
Peenemünde, in northeastern Germany, is home to a massive factory complex, where the Nazis are engaged in the development and construction of a new terror weapon, the V-1 flying bomb.
The ski bunkers were actually the storage buildings for the V-1 rockets. And the V-1 rockets were a nifty piece of engineering. It was a torpedo about 25 feet long with a stovepipe on top, which was the pulse jet engine. They would store them in here for quick delivery to a launching pad. So you can actually see the trolley marks where they'd carry the V-1s in. It was like a cradle. But this was not the final preparation for the launching. The setting of the altimeter or the compass or even the warhead detonators would be done at other bunkers closer to the launching pad, just over here at the far end of the forest. This is the Richthaus, or the non-magnetic building, and you can see there's not much left of it. It must have had a bad encounter with an Allied bomb. What would happen here is the final stage of preparation before launching, they would bring the V1 in. You can see what's left of the doorway here. This was a non-magnetic building, and it had to be that because this is where they set the compass. And they would put 2 detonators in, one on the belly and one on the nose. So if it landed flat, it would go off, or if it came down nose first, it would also go off. Once this was done, the wings are attached, it's still on its trolley, and it's taken over to the launching pad. This is the launching ramp, and it's really all that's left of the entire launching facility. It's built of cinder blocks, and the idea was it would protect the crew from any explosion that might go on during the rocket launching. And within it, they put a catapult, 150 feet long. And of course, the reason they needed a catapult is that the V1 was only airworthy at 150 miles an hour. So the catapult had to fire it out of here like a slingshot. When everything is going, they'd run back to a little control bunker over there, and from there, they pressed a button which would ignite the jet engine. So when everything was set, the engine is firing, the Germans would press the button, and the rocket would go. One thing that was totally unique about the V1 was the sound it made. It was really infamous. Because it was a pulse engine, it would start off with fuel coming in, it would be ignited by the oxygen, and then it would explode, combust. And once it combusted, a new amount of fuel would go in, and then it would combust. So you had a effect. From these positions, the Germans planned to rain terror on London. It was going to be a new blitz with new vengeance weapons. The Allied reaction to the German rocket program was swift, and they initiated Operation Crossbow to destroy all German rocket installations. The heavy bombers went across to Germany and destroyed Peenemünde, and they launched attacks on every one of the ski sites, and there were more than 100 of them. At first, it was heavy bombers bombing from about 10,000 feet. And you can see evidence of their bombing all the way through this park. This is a crater maybe made by a 500-pounder bomb from a Lancaster. Some of the fighter bombers they used here were the Mosquitoes. They also had no-ball raids, or what the pilots started to call no-balls raids, because when they came in low level to attack these sites, they were hit by rifle fire, machine gun fire, and light anti-aircraft fire.
V1 sites you couldn't attack at low level. They were sited in awkward places anyway, and of course the building was just a single story. So the only sensible way of the Mosquito was to do shallow dive bombing. You'd go in low level to avoid interception, and then just before the target, pull up to about 2,500 feet. Come in a shallow dive, bomb in the dive, and go back down to the deck to escape.
By May 1944, all 100 of the ski sites were destroyed. But the Germans reacted very quickly, and they built modified V1 sites, and they got rid of the ski buildings. And these were very difficult to detect because they were built around farms and in little woodlands. There was no clear bunkers to attack. And on June 13, 1944, the first V1s fell in London, and a new blitz had begun.
The V1 attacks on England are devastating. The civilian population is thrown into alarm. And with little defense against the high-speed bombs, the Allies look once again to the Mosquito, hoping their tried and tested super weapon can turn back this new threat. June 6, 1944, the Allied invasion of Normandy. After 5 long years of occupation, the liberation of Western Europe is underway. But the Nazi threat is far from over. In truth, The Germans, with their advanced rocket technology, are about to unleash a wave of terror attacks on England's civilian population with their new secret weapon, the V-1 flying bomb. On June 13th, 1944, only 1 week after D-Day, the first V-1s rained down on London.
There were so many V-1s coming across through the circuit of the airfield that it was untenable.
I was underneath a couple when I was near London, and of course when you saw it and that motor cut, everybody hit the ditch, because you know it was going to crash.
We heard this one come over, and then the engine stopped. So everybody fell on the floor. The dust came out from the walls and the ceiling about 6 inches. And I got up from the floor to my drink, which was on the bar. And as soon as I touched the glass, it disintegrated, just fell apart. And I always remember the barman, he also appeared from the other side of the bar. He said, "I saw that, so I'd better have one on the house."
Ground crews fight desperately to repel the V-1 attacks. Anti-aircraft fire and barrage balloons proved marginally effective. Nonetheless, the majority of flying bombs slipped through. The Allies quickly realize the most effective way to stop the V-1 is to intercept them in the air. Once again, they turn to the unparalleled speed and firepower of the de Havilland Mosquito.
When the V-1 started to come off, we were taken right off of intruding in the hopes of shooting down these V-1s. There was a vivid flash on the French coast. All you'd see is a big flame, because it trailed a flame about 20 feet long. We could see it coming out across the channel, so we would do an interception. These things were going pretty close to 400 miles an hour and sometimes a little more. And even diving on them, we had trouble catching them. We immediately decided on a tactic of patrolling at 10,000 feet. We'd peel over and try to get the Mosquito up to 440 miles an hour.
We were gaining some because the fire coming out of the ass end of the V-1 was getting bigger. The Mosquito was screaming in every joint. I thought the wings would never stand it. We began to level out, and the clock said 400 miles per hour. We're too close. I shut my eyes as the cannons began banging away.
The real danger was if you picked up a piece of debris in the radiator. The other problem was that it produced a very vivid white flash that would blind you.
When the explosion came, I thought I was going to be dead. The goddamn thing went off right in our faces. "I bet we're all blistered," my pilot said. He was talking about the Mosquito. There wasn't an inch of paint anywhere. The Mosquito was black. No numbers, no letters, nothing.
Once we got the hang of the tactic, we were fairly successful, and I think 418 Squadron shot down about 80 of these B-1s.
Russ Bannock goes on to destroy a total of 19 V-1 rockets and 11 German night fighters, earning him the distinction as Canada's second highest scoring fighter ace of the Second World War. The Mosquito proves a highly effective weapon against the last of the V-1 attacks, but the war in the air is changing. 1944 also sees the introduction of Germany's powerful V-2 rocket and the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter, heralding a new era of air warfare. By the time war against Germany ends in May 1945, the Mosquito's reign is all but over.
This is the church in the small village of Pointe-à-Picardy in northwest France. It's about 100 miles from England, and during the Second World War, there are many air bases in this area and many transport centers that were targets of the Allied air attacks. There's a cemetery just up here that contains 149 Commonwealth airmen. Most of the men buried here were killed on bombing operations. Here's the grave of Flying Officer Harry Jones of Montreal. He was a pilot of a Halifax bomber when he was shot down on June 8, 1944. But there's another crew in here that's quite different. They were the men known as intruders. This is the grave of R.J. Tomlinson of Sherbrooke, Quebec. He was the pilot of a Mosquito, and here's his navigator, Charles Essam, who was shot down on intruder operations on June 3, 1944. The intruders were so effective that the Germans referred to them as the bandits of the air.
Though it has never enjoyed the historic fanfare of the Spitfire or the Lancaster bomber, the fact remains that for 4 crucial years, the Mosquito, with its matchless combination of speed, maneuverability, and firepower, was the Allies' most versatile aircraft. Piloted by fearless crews, its hundreds of high-risk missions hastened the end of the Second World War, undoubtedly saving countless lives that might yet have been lost.
Go, you who see the need to help a people steely strong and brave, who are fighting for their freedom, their homes, their very lives. So that in freedom they shall walk the sunny soil of Spain, in freedom till their vineyards, in freedom with all the strength of bursting energy, build a new and happy Spain. Salute
and honor volley, and honor volley 3 times.
In 1936, 19-year-old Canadian Jules Pavio, along with hundreds of other Canadian volunteers, journeyed to Spain to defend the Republic against the rise of fascism. Half of these men would never return home. Today, historian Norm Christie has come back to the battlefields of Spain to uncover the truth behind one of the nation's darkest mysteries, the fate of those missing volunteers, whose stories have remained buried for more than half a century.
This is a burial ground in a little village called Uclas, 100 kilometers south of Madrid. And the people here are exhuming the remains of Republican soldiers killed in the Spanish Civil War 70 years ago. Cemeteries like this and these exhumations are the grim realities of war, and they're something you don't get from looking at pristine cemeteries. It's when you're looking at these skulls and these skeletons that you know what the cost of war really is. The Spanish Civil War involved 40,000 international volunteers, including 1,500 Canadians. Half of those men were killed, and none of them have a grave. These people have simply vanished.
Today, Spain is a progressive democratic nation, open and free. But just below the peaceful surface lie the reminders of a deeply troubled past, a story of terror and oppression, that began over 70 years ago. July 17, 1936, fascist nationalists, aided by the military, launch a surprise coup against the Democratic Republic of Spain.
¡Viva España!
But the uprising is only partly successful. The fascists claim scattered parts of the country, while the Republicans retain the rest, including the capital, Madrid. The stage is now set for what will become one of the most savage civil wars of the 20th century. In September 1936, General Francisco Franco emerges as the leader of the fascist forces, and by the end of October, he has led his armies to the outskirts of Madrid.
This is the Gran Via in Madrid, and today, as in 1936, it's the heart of a vibrant city. It was also the center of the Republican cause, and the fascists knew that to win the war quickly, they would have to capture Madrid. And to do this, they started a terror bombing program using the Condor Legion, which was Hitler's contribution to the fascist cause. But rather than terrorize the population, he increased their will to resist.
For months, Madrid has been a city of terror. Day and night, death, sudden and frightful, stalks the Spanish capital. The drone of planes starts the panic-stricken populace rushing to shelter. Before their eyes, they've seen whole families wiped out by the insurgents' bomb-dropping sky raiders. The coming of the new year promises only desolation for stricken Madrid.
Brutal conflict catches the world's attention. Images of the devastation wrought by the fascists raise a call to arms throughout the West, and soon thousands of idealistic volunteers are signing up and sailing for Spain.
You saw in the newsreels the bombardment, the shelling of Madrid, and the people running into shelter, getting killed on the streets. This was fighting and aggression, a danger in the world. This really affected me. When you saw these newsreels, you wanted to do something. Here is a people that are suffering under an attack. What can you do to help these people? When the opportunity arose, I went. 35,000 of us that went there from different ethnic backgrounds, religious, political, a lot of writers and artists, and so on. But all were anti-fascists.
These raw recruits are organized into units known as the International Brigades, ragtag bands of civilian idealists and socialists with one common goal: to fight the rising tide of fascism.
By the fall of 1936, the fascists had captured most of southwestern Spain and were ready for their assault on Madrid. Their plan was to attack the western outskirts of Madrid, capture the city, and end the war. In fact, from here, you get a clear view of the Manzanares River Valley, and this is where the fascists were going to launch their attack. And they did so on November the 8th, 1936. With great success at the start, they started to push their way into the city, and this caused great panic. It looked like Madrid was going to fall and that the war could be over. And just at the nick of time, a new group of troops arrive, the men of the International Brigades, and they were here to save Madrid.
The Internationals add 3,500 desperately needed combatants to the defense of Madrid, bringing with them a significant boost to Republican morale. Their cries of "No pasarán," meaning they shall not pass, inspire fellow defenders. For nearly a week, Spaniards and Internationals fight side by side, defending Madrid. But the inexperience of the volunteers takes its toll. During this time, 1 in 3 of the men known as Los Brigadistas is killed.
This is the pharmacy building in the University of Madrid. And in 1936, this campus became a battleground. In fact, you can see scars of the old fighting up on the brickwork near the top of those buildings. That's where the snipers were, and of course, they would exchange fire with the men on the ground. There's more evidence of the battles over here. On November 15, 1936, the Moors and the Spanish Legion came across the Manzaneros River and stormed into the campus. And it was here that some of the most ferocious fighting of the Spanish War took place. You can actually see some of the damages here. This is actually bullet holes in granite, all left over from 1936. You can see bullet holes in the regular brick up here. When the Moors and the Spanish Legion came across, the international brigades were ordered to repel them. Really hand-to-hand battles from basement, floor to floor. The internationals finally stopped the fascist attack, but with very heavy casualties. Roughly half the men in the battle were either killed or wounded.
After 14 days of battle, Republican forces succeed in turning back the fascists, but the cost of defending the capital is terrible. Over 10,000 lives have been lost, including 2,000 men of the fledgling international brigades. Today, little evidence of their sacrifice remains. Only a few scattered bullet holes and shell scars. By the end of November 1936, Franco accepts that Madrid cannot be taken. He begins preparations for a new offensive, one that will bring in the new year with the blood of tens of thousands of men. Among them, many newly arrived internationals, receiving their baptism of fire at the Battle of Jarama. The Jarama River Valley, a quiet, picturesque region of central Spain. Close inspection, though, reveals scars of a violent past. Scattered traces of a terrible battle, one that would transform the valley into a vast, unmarked grave of the Spanish Civil War. February 6, 1937, the Jarama River Valley erupts in withering fire. As 40,000 soldiers of the fascist army launch a new offensive. It's here in the killing fields of Jarama where the 450 American, Cuban, Irish, and Canadian volunteers of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion receive their bloody baptism of fire.
So, Sevi, what do you think these are? Is that a human bone?
It could be. I don't know. A doctor can say that.
Well, check them out. We'll take them to the archaeologist.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the Battle of the Lincoln Battalion on February 27th, 1937. Now, they started from these positions?
Yes, and they have to attack against the fascist line, who is on the west, in the skyline.
So basically, they got up. This is their first battle as a unit, and they've got to go up this rise. And
yes.
They were unsupported in the attack.
Yes, the fascist machine gun.
Just shoot them down.
It was a murder.
In certain trench sections along the line, whole groups of men would barely reach the top of the parapets before being smashed back into the trenches by withering fire. Each time the pitiful line rose to continue the advance, the deadly cross and direct fire of whole batteries of guns cut into them, thinning their ranks, so that entire squads and sections were melting away in death and agony.
So they never had a chance. My understanding is they had 450 men, and out of those 450 men, 127 were killed in that short attack. Do you know how far they got? Or were they...
No, they got 100 meters far from the trenches, but they can advance more. It was very, very unsuccessful.
It had been the bloodiest battle so far in the war, and it brought the end to the Battle of Jarama.
Yes.
Of the 127 men of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion killed, at least 9 were Canadians. Men like Joseph Campbell, Fred Lackey, and George Laskowski, all lost in their first day of battle. In total, the fighting claims the lives of over 10,000 men from both sides, for little or no gain. Today, the vast majority of those killed remain where they fell, lost among the thousands of dead left unclaimed and unmarked on the battlefields of Jarama.
So you said that there were a number of brigadistas buried here who were killed in Jarama.
Yes, 2,000 soldiers, Spaniards and foreigners that were buried in this site of
on this side here.
Yes, at the end of the war, Franco ordered to remove all the remains of the bodies. It was a friend of mine, François Massou, a French brigadista from Oloron-Saint-Marie, that came here in '86 in order to discover where his comrades fallen in the battle. He discovered that the remains of the body were put in that corner of the cemetery.
Over here?
See, as a rubbish, yes. At the end, François Massou got to put this memorial.
What does it say?
Well, in the memory of the heroes, fighters, anti-fascists, Spaniards and foreigners of the international brigades that who in the Battle of Jarama gave their lives for the cause of freedom of Spain and Europe and the world. More than 2,000 bodies are inside this place.
So why did it take so long for them to recognize these people?
Well, because under the dictatorship of Franco, it was not possible to remember these guys.
How many thousands of other ones are buried in unknown or unmarked graves from the Republican side?
Thousands and thousands of people. You know that there are a lot of graves, common mass graves, in many places of Spain.
The Battle of Jarama ends in a stalemate, and the valley is once again quiet. But as 1937 wears on, fascist attacks all over Spain claim tens of thousands more Republican lives. Many are the volunteers of the international brigades, men who came to Spain to fight for their ideals, but soon find themselves fighting for their lives.
By the spring of 1937, the line had stabilized around Madrid, and the defense of Madrid had bought a lot of time for the Republican Army to form up, to get reinforcements, to get some armaments, and by July 1937, they were ready to launch their first major offensive of the war, and they chose to launch the attack 40 kilometers west of Madrid against the fascist positions near Burnetti. Right now, we're trying to find the jump-off position of the Lincoln Battalion for the Battle of Burnetti. And the Lincolns and the Washingtons contained a lot of the new arrivals, a lot of the Americans and Canadians. So for most of these guys, this was going to be their first taste of battle. Very few had a military background. These are men who deeply believed in the cause, sincerely believed in the cause, and were willing to give their lives for Spain and for the fight against the fascists.
For days, the men of the 15th International Brigade maintain a non-stop assault. They overrun the fascists, defending the small towns and villages of the Guadarrama River Valley, advancing at last to the foot of their final objective, a key nationalist position known as Mosquito Ridge.
This is the infamous Mosquito Ridge, and it was a main fascist position during the Battle of Burnetti. But you can see around us, you can hear the pile drivers and the earth movers. It's now vanishing into history itself, another lost site of the Spanish Civil War. But in 1937, this was a critical position. Mosquito Ridge gives a commanding view of the entire attacking force. So the advantage from this position was clearly with the fascists. So when the Americans and Canadians came across this valley here, they met heavy, heavy fire and took terrible casualties. One of the men in the attack was Jules Pavio with the Lincoln Battalion.
This looks like the top of the ridge where we attacked that day. The fire was very heavy, machine gun and rifle fire from over across this deep valley here. We were trying to go and get with the tanks up to the top of the ridge there and cut that highway. Fear doesn't come into it. You get keyed up when you go into battle like that. You fire and then run and drop down and fire again and run and then dive in. The firing was going above my head. So I thought, well, I got to get back to rejoin the battalion here. They were trying to get me, of course. And I finally made that final run up to here and yelling, don't fire, here, it's Jules. And there was a Japanese American with his head up, and as I was diving into there, he got hit right in there. You could just see the thing forming there. It was awful, but you know, it's so vivid when you see this. This fellow was a cook. He wanted to get to the front where he can do some fighting. So here he was in the first attack, and he got killed. After that, we were taken to try and cut the highway. We got into a hollow on the riverbed, and we got bombed. The bombing was so heavy, I can always recall trying to hang on to the tufts of grass. When I got back to Canada even, I'd hear a plane coming over, and I'd go diving for the ditch, you know, that panic. Sudden panic feeling, and it took years to subside. We had to then start moving back, but Moors started attacking us. It's an honor to die for Allah, so they keep coming at you. They won't stop. Now I'll have to use that bayonet. And I was wondering, I'm a peaceful guy, how am I gonna, kill a guy with a bayonet? So this is the kind of experience you have. You don't know how you're going to react, but you're going to do it. We killed quite a few, and we held those trenches until we saw that we were going to get annihilated.
On July 26th, after 20 days of fighting, the Republicans abandoned the battleground, leaving behind a devastated plain littered with thousands of bodies, including 24 Canadians, a third of all the Canadian volunteers who fought in the battle. But the volunteers of the international brigades have little time to recover as the Republican leaders are planning their next move, another massive offensive, this time in northern Spain. The advance begins on August 23rd, and over the course of the following week, Brigadista attack and capture enemy positions across the Aragon front. By the beginning of September, the internationals are ready to turn their sights on their next objective, the heavily fortified village of Belchite.
This is St. Augustine's Church, or what remains of St. Augustine's Church in Belchite. And it was attacked by the Lincoln Battalion in September 1937. And they managed to break through the back door here of the church and force the fascists out through this area here. And you can see the damage of this place. Like the shell holes, bullet holes. It's been destroyed in the fighting. As the Lincolns moved through the church, they forced the fascists out into the courtyard. And as they broke out, they got more resistance. One of the stories from the period is where Jim Wolfe from Vancouver was coming out through here, and he was hit by a grenade. It hit him in the face, and as he lay dying, he gave his cigarettes to a friend because he had no more use for them. But as you can see out here, taking the church was just the first phase. Belchite was a fascist stronghold. It was like a fortress, not a village. The fighting was house to house. It was bayonet, it was grenade, it was hand to hand. The men had to go in with a big ram, break the door open, clear the house, try to punch a hole through to the other house, and move one at a time. But you can see in this town how difficult this would have been. There was no escape for the fascists. They had to fight. They were fanatical fighters, and they weren't going to give an inch. One particular house gave the Lincolns great problems. They took a drum of fuel, rolled it into the house, and ignited it. And as they fought and tried to move down these streets, there were snipers, machine gun fire, constant incoming artillery, and it took them 6 days to take it.
My guards were so tired that they only woke when grenades were thrown up the alley in the early hours of the morning. Beautiful music floated over the city, followed by rifle and machine gun fire and grenade explosions. A short silence, and then a terrific bombardment of hand grenades thrown at our barricade. The whole night was like a fantastic melodrama. Weird, beautiful, dangerous, and delightful. Because we knew victory was ours.
This place is a remarkable memorial to the Spanish Civil War. It's incredible to think what took place here 6 days in September 1937. It reminds you of the streets of Ypres or maybe Dresden or Stalingrad. It just is a perfect monument to the fighting that took place. There's even a nice little piece up here where you have an unexploded shell embedded in the church tower. It's just absolutely phenomenal. When Franco first left this place as is, it was a propaganda piece to show the barbarism of the Republicans. But what he really created was a remarkable memorial to the suffering of war.
To this day, the casualty figures at Belchite remain unknown. One source claims that after the attack, fewer than 100 men were left standing. Today, the only tributes to their sacrifice are the crumbling walls and ruins of the battle-scarred village. The battle for Belchite marks the beginning of the end of the Republican offensive. And on March 9th, 1938, Franco launches a counteroffensive, decimating the Republican army as it retreats, spawning a new wave of violence that will claim thousands of lives, with thousands more simply vanishing.
In March 1938, the fascists launched a major offensive in the Aragon, and they broke through the Republican lines. In fact, they routed the Republican army, and the situation was desperate, and they threw in a lot of new reinforcements into the battle to try to stop the fascist advance. And Jules, you joined in that attack to try to stop the fascist advance.
Yes, I did, yes.
It's really a rout. It's more than a retreat, isn't it? They're really driving hard against the Republican force.
It was chaos.
And that's the position you were in when you set up your machine guns at the end of March.
Yes.
What we're going to do is we're going to try to find the position that you went into on that night.
Yes.
So here's the crossroads that we just went across. Yes. So according to the histories, you guys were pushed out into this area here. That ridge right over there on the left?
Could be.
Yeah,
Could
that's
be.
where you were probably in front of that. So Jules, does this look like it?
Yes, this looks more like it.
some pine trees here. What happened, as I was getting the machine gun crew into place, they were doing some digging. I saw these two soldiers, and I wanted to find out who they were beside us. Were they the right brigades that we were told? So as I walked over to two soldiers, they put the guns at me. Monosoriego, put your hands up. I yelled to them, fire, these are fascists, tiras, fascistas. They jumped up in behind me and led me back with the rifles through the woods into a little hollow. And there was Carl Geiser and the other 14, 15 guys with him. We were marched down the highway, down that slope, until we reached the farmhouse and brigade or divisional headquarters of the Italians.
What we're going to do is we're going to go down the road and try to find where that farmhouse is or where it would have been.
Yes,
we don't know
let's
if it's
try.
still there today.
Yeah.
So you can tell us the rest of the story, which is was quite an incredible story.
Yes, all right.
Hey, Jules.
Okay.
So come on over here.
Yeah.
So let's carry on with your story.
We came down this road and we were brought to this farm. They quickly lined us up against the wall. And they formed the firing squad. You feel you have to die like a brigadista. And so we were getting ready to sing the International.
So you're
and we're
bracing
ready.
yourself.
We're bracing ourselves, okay. And then black limousine comes down the road. They stopped. They saw something happening here, called over to the officer in charge and asked what he was doing. And he says, why are you killing these Reds? Oh, these are internationals. No, we want to capture them. They wanted to exchange them. A miracle has happened. You know, there is a great feeling of joy and release. And that's when we're then put into the cattle cars and taken to Burgos.
So do you recognize it?
Yes, I do. This we spent a lot of time here. Brings back memories.
Now, you said there was about 500,
About 500
international
of us, yes.
brigaders, and there were a lot of Canadians with you?
There was about 20 of us, yeah, Canadians.
Did you fear for your life? Did you think you were okay, or did you still think there was an element of danger in being here?
Oh, well, you never know. Yeah, we didn't know if they were, but you don't think of it, you know. You're trying to make life interesting and worthwhile and eat enough so you survive. There was two guards, Sticky and Tanky. Tanky had been wounded by the British, and he really hated them. Sticky just liked to swing his stick and break them on the backs of the prisoners, us coming down, especially to the meals, running through the gauntlet. So he had a whip made out of bull's penis with lead weights on the ends. So
That made him happy. It didn't break, and he could swing it, and it lasted a long time. But it wasn't all bad. I recall us preparing for the Christmas concert. We invited the officers and the camp commandant. Just to see those Germans, their German choir, to sing there the bell song and the low sings, the hum, and then into powerful singing. It was so thrilling, tears came into your eyes. Everybody stood up, ole, ole. And the guards and the prisoners, we were like one. We were patting each other on the back. And it was just that feeling of that, humanity, finally, the beauty of just being able to do that. These Germans didn't expect to have a life afterwards. They were going to be sent back into concentration camp, probably executed. So, but they could sing like this. As a matter of fact, the 3 German international officers were executed here, and the grave is somewhere outside the wall. I wonder if we can find it.
Yeah, we're gonna ask the priest to
Yes.
see if we can try to find where the graves were.
Yes. All right. Oh, yes, this is it.
That's where you're held?
Yes. Yeah, we were on the 2nd and 3rd floors. I know I was on the 3rd floor. 2nd floor is where we had the Christmas concert. Yeah.
All right there.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
This is the graveyard.
Is this the graveyard?
Yeah. Can we go up here?
Yeah.
These are the graves.
Hey, están aquí.
Los que morían aquí o eran fusilados fueron enterrados ahí, cada uno en su tumba, no aquí sino afuera, a la esquina del edificio y junto al árbol ese nogal.
Just here, on this lawn here, Jules, is where the people who were shot here were buried. But they moved the graves. They brought the bones out, and they're now buried here, under where we are.
I see, yeah.
So, the International Brigade and also the Spanish fighters, they're all here.
They're all buried here, eh? And how many would there have been?
That's 2025, including Spanish and international.
I see. Well, that's quite a few that died here anyway, yeah.
Grazie.
Okay.
So this is the graves that they got. This is what's left of them.
Yes, imagine, yeah.
How do you feel when you think about these people?
Well, I feel very sad, that this would have had to happen. They were great fighters and officers, but that's what the fascists did, after all. They, at the front, they executed us as fast as they could. I was one of the lucky ones.
Jules Pavio endures the hardship of the Burgos prison camp for over a year, until his release and return to Canada in 1939. For Pavio, the war is over. But for the remaining volunteers of the International Brigades, who continue the fight, the worst days of the Spanish Civil War are yet to come. Throughout the spring of 1938, the fascists continue their assault on Republican forces. But in July, the Republicans muster their remaining strength and embark on one last offensive against the nationalists in the hope of stopping Franco's advance.
We're driving to the Pandols Mountains in Catalonia, and it was the scene of the great fighting during the Ebro Offensive in the summer of 1938. The international brigades were moving forward, advancing towards their old failures at Gandesa. And there, they'd run into big trouble.
Over the next few weeks, the brigadists did launch a series of all-out attacks on the superior fascist force. The offensive quickly withers, and they're forced to withdraw through the mountains west of Gandesa.
I'm with Michael, and we're going to go up this valley and find a monument to the Brigadistas Internacionales that was put up in 1938. Michael, this area was used by the Republicans in 1938. Tell me about the pass we're taking up to the top.
Sí, es el único sitio que existe para poder acceder a la Sierra de Pàndols por esta zona de aquí. Entonces, como el ataque fascista era por la zona del norte, fueron retirándose y este es el único camino que existe para llegar a la carretera y seguir. Y vamos a encontrar un monumento dedicado a las brigadas internacionales que es único y exclusivo en España.
So let's go up and find it. You can lead.
Okay.
So, tell me what this is.
En la misma batalla del Ebro por las brigadas internacionales.
So it was built by the very same international brigaders in the battle.
But to do this, I mean,
Yeah.
this is a true love for your comrades, for your fallen comrades.
Sí.
Can you actually read what that says? Can you translate that? I know it's hard to read, but...
In memory of the fighters, the Spanish and international fighters.
De la brigada.
From the brigade.
Te recuerda el ejército español.
With the Spanish army remembers you.
Viva la República.
Long live the Republic.
But this looks like an individual grave. Egon
Schmidt, de Latvia, caído el 19 de agosto de 1938. Ofensiva Ebro.
This is the only individual grave to an international or even a Republican soldier that I've seen the whole time we've been researching this. So these bodies have to be in the valleys or on the ridges somewhere. I mean, there's no graves for this war. It's like it's the only war where no one got killed. You've got the bunkers, you've got the trenches, you've got the tunnels, you've got all sorts of evidence of war, but you don't have any cemetery.
Durante 40 años que han estado pegando palo, todo el mundo tiene que olvidar.
See, for 40 years after Franco won the war, they were made to forget. There were fascist brigades who were sent out to find bodies and any vestige of the war and hide them, take them away and bury them and forget about them. The monument was kind of hidden.
Y el que lo conocía no ha dicho nada.
These internationals, they came to Spain to help out. These are very brave men. They gave their lives for the cause of fighting fascism. Don't you think they deserve something a little bit more than this?
Cada país tendría que tener su memorial de sus propios hombres.
Yeah, every country should have their own monument to their own men who fell here.
It's amazing. Fantastic, though.
On August 26th, the battered 15th International Brigade staggers down from the Pàndols Mountains, and in September, the surviving brigadista are reluctantly sent home. For them, the bloody 3-year war is over, but they leave behind 15,000 fallen comrades. Most still lay on the battlefields where they were cut down, their memory lost in defeat and later erased by a fanatical victor.
The fascist victory in 1939 brought about 40 years of dictatorship in Spain under Francisco Franco. To the victor go the spoils and the right to write history and to raise memorials to their fallen. And this is Franco's memorial to his fallen. This is the Basilica of the Valley of the Fallen, and it's part of the memorial to the 200,000 fascist dead of the Spanish Civil War. In 1975, General Franco was buried here. And it's a very impressive monument, and the basilica is surmounted by a giant cross that overlooks the Valley of the Fallen, which was a battlefield of the Spanish Civil War. Before the vanquished, there were years of persecution, and their dead lay for decades in unmarked graves. I'm with Maximo Molina, who's the director of the dig here at Uclas. So can you tell me what you've got here?
We have the burial place from the people who were killed by Franco's dictatorship. In here, for example, in this grave, there were 5 people who had been shot dead. After being shot, they were shot on the head. That's the way we identify the people who were shot dead, executed, that's right.
Were any of these graves marked?
There was nothing here to say that this is a cemetery until 1988.
On a personal side, your grandfather was shot during the Civil War. And is that what brought you in, or was it something else?
No, it's that what brought me in directly. He was found and taken out of the place he had hidden in, and he was shot dead the very same morning. It's pretty unfair that all these people, either soldiers or Republicans who were killed, have been forgotten for so long.
Explain to me the split in Spain about uncovering the history of the Spanish Civil War.
Well, basically, the ones who won the war, obviously, they got their disease back. They were exhumed with public money, and they got many benefits from Franco's government, Franco supporters. On the other hand, the Republicans, the one who lost the war, they got nothing. They got their families badly buried and forgotten, and in places that have no dignity, or even in the middle of the country or the side of the roads.
There must be around 200,000 missing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Are you going to find them all?
Oh, I wish I could.
So do you have anything to say to these men?
To these men? I don't know. It's that we are trying to get them back the dignity they never lost, is what I would tell them. Bringing a little bit of justice to these people who have been forgotten. And then trying to close, for once and definitely, the wounds from the Civil War that are still open. This is something we have to face. If we don't face the past, how on earth are we going to look at the future?